The words land like stones in still water, rippling through the classroom with devastating precision. "You can't even read!" Mrs. Vandermeer's voice carries that particular tone teachers use when they've decided a student isn't worth the effort anymore. Contempt wrapped in professional disappointment. 28 fourth graders sit frozen at their desks. Textbooks open to page 47. The paragraph Kellen Baptiste had just butchered hanging in the air like smoke. Kellen stares at the page, willing the letters to stay still. They don't. They never do. The B and D swap places mid-sentence. The P flips upside down into a Q. Words he knew yesterday become meaningless jumbles today. His finger traces the line for the third time, and he can feel sweat beading at his hairline under the harsh fluorescent lights that make everything worse, sharper, more impossible. He starts, voice barely above a whisper. "Louder, Kellen, if you're going to waste our reading time, at least let everyone hear you struggle." Mrs. Vandermeer stands at the front of the room, arms crossed over her cardigan, the same cardigan she wears every Tuesday. Behind her, the wall displays photos of her spelling bee champions from years past, all of them smiling, all of them white. Kellen tries again. The boy, no, the dog." The sentence rearranges itself before his eyes. He knows these words, he does, but knowing and reading are different countries, and he's lost the map between them. Someone snickers, then someone else. The sound spreads like contagion. "That's enough!" Mrs. Vandermeer closes her own book with a snap that echoes like a gavel. "Students who can't manage simple fourth-grade passages have no business wasting everyone's time. Perhaps you should spend less time daydreaming and more time on basic phonics." Kellen's hands shake in his lap. He touches the chain around his neck, feeling for his grandmother's reading glasses. The metal is warm from his skin. She'd been gone 6 months now, and the glasses are all he has left except the recordings on his mother's old phone and memories that hurt more than help. The morning announcements crackle through the speaker above the whiteboard. Principal Chen's voice reminds everyone that spelling bee sign-up sheets are in the main office. Students interested in representing Riverside Elementary at the district competition should see their homeroom teachers. Kellen doesn't mean to speak. The words just come out, muscle memory from conversations with his grandmother about words and patterns and sounds that unlock meaning. "I want to try out." The classroom goes silent in a different way now. Expectant. Hungry. Mrs. Vandermeer turns slowly, and Kellen watches her mouth curve into something that might be a smile if smiles could cut. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "The spelling bee. I want to—" The laugh stops him mid-sentence. Not a chuckle or a giggle, but a cold, dismissive bark that says everything about what she thinks of him, his abilities, his right to take up space. "Kellen, you just demonstrated that you cannot read a fourth-grade paragraph. The spelling bee is for students who have mastered basic literacy. You would embarrass yourself in this school." In the third row, Tatum Vandermeer, the teacher's granddaughter, blonde and sharp-featured and always watching, pulls out her phone. She angles it carefully, trying to look casual. She's recording. Kellen can see the red dot in his peripheral vision. "But Kellen starts. "No, absolutely not. I will not sign off on your participation. End of discussion." Mrs. Vandermeer turns back to the board, dismissing him with her shoulders. "Everyone take out your grammar worksheets." Kellen sits frozen. His chest feels tight, like someone's wrapped rubber bands around his ribs and keeps twisting. The chain around his neck suddenly weighs 1,000 pounds. Around him, students rustle papers and whisper, and he catches fragments. "Can't even read. So embarrassing. Why is he even in our class?" The bell rings eventually. It always does. Kellen gathers his books with mechanical precision, head down, eyes on the scuffed linoleum. He doesn't look at anyone. If he doesn't look, maybe they're not staring. Maybe their eyes aren't following him like searchlights. He walks the hallway on autopilot, left at the water fountain, right past the gym, through the double doors into the library where the lighting is softer and the air smells like old paper and possibility. Mr. Okafor looks up from the circulation desk, his rectangular glasses reflecting the computer screen. He's checking in returns, but his hands slow when he sees Kellen's face. "Hey, young scholar. You good?" Kellen nods, but his throat is too tight for words. He makes it to the bathroom in the back corner before the first tear falls. The bathroom is single occupancy, quiet, safe. Kellen locks the door and leans against the sink. His reflection stares back, 9 years old, small for his age, eyes red-rimmed and defeated. He pulls his grandmother's glasses from the chain, holds them up to the light. The lenses are scratched from years of use, the frames bent slightly at one temple where she'd sat on them once and laughed about it. He can hear her voice in his memory, warm and patient, slightly roughened by the illness that would take her 3 months later. They'd been sitting at her kitchen table, audio files playing on repeat. Her hand covering the words on the page so he could only listen. Kellen closes his eyes, grips the glasses tighter, and whispers the words she'd said 100 times, 1,000 times, every time the letters betrayed him and the world said he wasn't smart enough. Letters lie, baby, but sounds tell the truth. The knock on the bathroom door is gentle. 3 soft taps, then Mr. Okafor's voice, warm and unhurried. "Kellen, you don't have to come out, but I'm here if you want to talk." Kellen wipes his face with his sleeve, tucks his grandmother's glasses back under his shirt. He opens the door. Mr. Okafor doesn't ask what's wrong. He already knows. In a school this size, news travels faster than fire. Instead, he gestures toward the reading nook in the far corner, the one with the beanbag chairs and the window that looks out onto the playground. "Come sit with me for a minute." They settle into the chairs. Mr. Okafor doesn't fill the silence with empty reassurances. He waits. "I can't read," Kellen finally says. His voice is small, defeated. "Not like other kids. The letters, they move around, they flip. A B becomes a D, and I don't even notice until someone's laughing. Mrs. Vandermeer's right. I can't even read a 4th grade paragraph without messing up." "That's dyslexia," Mr. Okafor says quietly. "It's not about being smart or not smart. Your brain processes visual information differently. Doesn't matter what it's called." Kellen picks at a loose thread on the beanbag. "I still can't do it." Mr. Okafor leans forward, elbows on his knees. "Can I tell you something? When I came here from Nigeria at 7, I couldn't read English. Not one word. My teacher told my parents I was slow. She wanted to hold me back 2 grades. He smiles slightly. "Turns out I wasn't slow. I was learning in a language I didn't speak yet. Sometimes the way we measure things is the problem, not the person." Kellen looks up. There's something in Mr. Okafor's eyes, recognition maybe, or understanding. "My grandmother," Kellen starts, then stops, starts again. "Before she died, she taught me something, a different way." "A different way to read?" "No," Kellen shakes his head. "I still can't really read, but she taught me to spell, by sound. She said letters lie, but sounds tell the truth." Mr. Okafor sits up straighter. "Show me." "Show you what?" "Spell something for me. A hard word." Kellen hesitates. He hasn't done this for anyone except his grandmother, and she's been gone 6 months. But Mr. Okafor's face is open, curious, not mocking. "Okay, say a word, any word, but don't show me. Just say it." Mr. Okafor thinks for a moment, then speaks slowly, clearly. pneumono-ultramicroscopic silico-volcanoconiosis. It's the longest word in the English dictionary. 45 letters. Most adults can't spell it. Kellen closes his eyes. He listens to the echo of the word in his mind, breaking it into component sounds. His grandmother's voice overlays Mr. Okafor's patient and warm. Listen for the roots, baby. Every sound has a history. Pieniu mono, he begins, eyes still closed. That's Greek. Pneumon means lung. The P is silent because Greek words that start with PN drop the sound but keep the letter. Mr. Okafor's sharp intake of breath doesn't stop him. ULTRAMICROSCOPIC. Kellen's fingers tap against his leg, marking syllables. Latin prefix ultra for beyond. Greek micros for small, scoping to look at. The C stays hard before O. He continues syllable by syllable, explaining each root's origin, each sound pattern's logic. Greek silic for silicon, Latin vulcan for volcano, Greek conies for dust, Latin osis for condition. When he finishes, he opens his eyes. Mr. Okafor is staring at him like he's just witnessed something impossible. How did you do that? Kellen pulls out his grandmother's glasses, holds them like a talisman. She made recordings, hundreds of them. Words spoken slowly, broken into pieces. She'd play them over and over while I closed my eyes. She taught me that every language leaves sound fingerprints. Greek words have certain patterns, Latin words have others. If you know the roots, you can build any word just from hearing it. Your grandmother was Dr. Kellen Baptiste. It's not a question. Mr. Okafor's voice carries recognition. I read her work in graduate school. She argued that dyslexia isn't a deficit, it's a different cognitive architecture. She called it the audio-phonetic pattern system. Kellen's voice strengthens. She said my brain doesn't process visual symbols well, but I hear patterns other people miss. Tiny differences in pronunciation, stress, rhythm. She said I wasn't broken, just different. The memory comes sharp and clear. His grandmother's kitchen, late afternoon light through yellow curtains. Her laptop open, audio files queued. Her hand warm on his shoulder as she covered the written words, forcing him to rely only on sound. Close your eyes, Kellen. Tell me what you hear, not what you see, what you hear. Week after week, month after month, while other kids learned to read, he learned to listen. While they memorized letter combinations, he memorized sound signatures. Etymology became his alphabet, phonetics became his grammar. She was sick, Kellen says quietly. The last few months her voice got rough. She knew she was running out of time. She made me practice every day. She said someday I'd need this, and I'd understand why being different was actually a gift. Mr. Okafor removes his glasses, cleans them slowly. When he speaks, his voice is thick. That wasn't just teaching, Kellen. That was legacy work. She was giving you a superpower. Doesn't feel like a superpower when everyone thinks you're stupid. Does your mother know you can do this? Kellen shakes his head. She knows Grandma taught me stuff, but I haven't really shown her, not like this. Why not? The answer sits heavy in Kellen's chest. Because Mrs. Vandermeer said I can't even read. She said I'd embarrass the school. If I can't read, how can I be good at anything with words? I thought maybe Grandma's method only worked because she believed in me. Maybe it doesn't work in the real world. Mr. Okafor leans back, processing. Outside the window, kids are playing kickball, their shouts muffled through glass. Normal kids doing normal things, not carrying the weight of being different. Kellen, what you just did, that's not a trick, that's not memorization. You explained etymological roots I'd need a dictionary to verify. You mapped sound to origin to spelling in real time. That's a legitimate cognitive skill. That's genius, just not the kind most people recognize. Mrs. Vandermeer wouldn't think so. Mrs. Vandermeer, Mr. Okafor says carefully, is wrong, and I think it's time more people knew that. He pauses. The spelling bee registration closes in 3 days. Mr. Okafor arrives at Simone's apartment at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening, carrying a leather folder that smells of library binding glue and possibility. She answers in scrubs, 20 minutes home from her hospital shift, exhaustion carved into the lines around her eyes. Ms. Baptiste, I need to show you something about Kellen. She lets him in, already defensive. The apartment is small but immaculate, photos of Kellen and his grandmother covering every surface. Dr. Lorraine Baptiste smiles from a dozen frames, her academic regalia visible in several. That same warm pride in her eyes that Kellen inherited. Mr. Okafor opens the folder. Inside are pages of handwritten notes in Kellen's careful print, phonetic breakdowns of words like chrysanthemum and onomatopoeia and prestidigitation. Sound pattern maps branch like neural pathways across the paper. At the bottom of each page, the etymology traced back to Greek, Latin, French roots. He did this in the library yesterday. I gave him 20 advanced words. He spelled every single one correctly and explained their linguistic origins. Simone's hand trembles as she touches the papers. My mother taught him this. I knew they worked together, but I didn't realize he'd gotten this far. It's not just far, Ms. Baptiste. It's extraordinary. This is a legitimate cognitive system. Your mother created something remarkable. Simone's eyes fill. She died 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. The last thing she said to me was, "Don't let them make him small." I didn't understand what she meant. I think she knew what he'd face. Ms. Baptiste, the district spelling bee registration closes tomorrow. Kellen wants to compete, but Mrs. Vandermeer banned him from even trying. Simone looks up sharply. Banned him? She said he can't read, so he can't compete. But that's not how this works. He has a different method, and it's valid. We need to fight this. Simone stands, exhaustion falling away like a shed coat. When can we see the principal? Principal Reeves's office smells like coffee and institutional carpet cleaner. The walls display framed district achievement awards and a diversity statement that suddenly feels performative. Reeves sits behind her desk, a white woman in her 50s with carefully neutral body language, while Mrs. Vandermeer occupies the chair beside her, spine rigid, lips pressed into a bloodless line. Mr. Okafor presents the documentation. Simone sits forward, her medical badge still clipped to her scrubs, lending her an air of professional authority that Mrs. Vandermeer clearly didn't expect. These are samples of Kellen's work. Audio recordings of him spelling and defining words at a 10th grade level. Written phonetic analyses. This isn't guessing. This is mastery through an alternative method. Mrs. Vandermeer barely glances at the papers. A spelling bee requires reading proficiency. The rules are clear. Students must demonstrate grade-level reading skills. Kellen Baptiste cannot read at a 2nd grade level, let alone 4th. This is a non-starter. He can spell, Mr. Okafor says evenly, which is what the competition tests. Spelling requires understanding written language. What you're describing is auditory mimicry, a party trick. It's not legitimate scholarship. Simone's voice cuts through the room like a scalpel. My mother spent 40 years studying linguistics at Georgetown University. She published 3 books on phonetic acquisition and cognitive language processing. She was a professor. You're telling me her method isn't legitimate because you don't understand it? Mrs. Vandermeer's face tightens. I'm telling you that a spelling bee has standards. We can't lower the bar because a student has difficulties. That's not fair to the children who've done the actual work. The actual work? Simone's voice rises. My son has worked harder than any kid in your class. He's overcome obstacles you can't imagine. His grandmother created a specialized system specifically for dyslexic learners, and it works. You're not protecting standards, you're protecting your own narrow definition of what intelligence looks like. Ms. Baptiste, I understand you're emotional, but don't you dare patronize me. I work 2 jobs to give my son opportunities. I watched my mother die while she made sure Kellen had tools to succeed in a world that would try to exclude him. And now you're proving exactly why she had to. Principal Reeves shifts uncomfortably. Perhaps we should focus on the actual requirements. Mr. Okafor, you said you have recordings. He plays 3 audio files on his phone. Kellen's voice, clear and confident, spelling words like pneumono-ultra-microscopic silica of volcanoconiosis, explaining that pneumono comes from Greek pneumon meaning lung, describing the Latin root structures, breaking down each morpheme with precision that makes even Mrs. Vandermeer blink. This demonstrates advanced linguistic knowledge, Mr. Okafor says, far beyond what the B requires. His method is different, but it's rigorous, and there's nothing in the competition rules that mandates a specific learning approach. Only that students can spell correctly. Reeves removes her glasses, cleans them. The silence stretches long enough to hear the hallway clock ticking. Mrs. Vandermeer, is there any actual rule that prevents Mr. Baptiste from competing? The spirit of the competition. Is there a written rule? Mrs. Vandermeer's jaw works. No, but this sets a dangerous precedent. We'll have every parent claiming their child's alternative method deserves accommodation. Or, Simone says quietly, you'll have to acknowledge that different doesn't mean deficient. Reeves looks between them, calculating. Legal liability, discrimination optics, the kind of calculation that makes Simone's stomach turn. Because her son's humanity shouldn't require a cost-benefit analysis. Mr. Baptiste may register, Reeves says finally. If he qualifies through the school round, he can advance. Mrs. Vandermeer stands abruptly. This is a mistake. You're setting him up for public failure. That's my decision. Reeves's tone closes the discussion. They file out, Simone's hand shaking as she signs the registration form. In the hallway, Mrs. Vandermeer catches her arm, grip cold and tight. He'll humiliate himself in front of the entire district. Hundreds of people, cameras. When he fails, it'll be on record forever. I hope you're prepared for that. I hope he is. She releases Simone's arm and walks away, heels clicking on linoleum like a countdown. Around the corner, hidden behind a water fountain, Kellen has heard everything. The doubt Mrs. Vandermeer planted takes root immediately, familiar and poisonous. What if she's right? What if Grandma's method only worked in the safety of her living room with someone who believed in him? What if he gets up on that stage and the letters dance anyway and everyone sees what Mrs. Vandermeer sees? What if he really can't? The letter from the educational psychologist arrived on a Tuesday in March. 2 years before everything changed. Kellen was 6 years old, sitting at his grandmother's kitchen table, trying not to cry as the words swam across the page like fish he couldn't catch. Dr. Kellen Baptiste took the diagnosis letter from Simone's trembling hands and read it twice. Severe dyslexia, reading comprehension below first percentile, visual processing disorder, recommended interventions. Then she smiled. Finally, she said, adjusting her reading glasses. Finally, someone who can help me prove it. Simone blinked. Mama, did you hear what they said? He can barely... I heard that my grandson's brain works exactly the way I've been theorizing about for 30 years. Lorraine knelt beside Kellen, cupping his face. Baby, do you know how long humans have been talking? Kellen shook his head. About 100,000 years. Do you know how long we've been reading? Another head shake. 5,000 years. Your brain is doing what human brains did for 95,000 years. Before anyone invented the alphabet. You're not broken. You're just listening to something older than books. She set up her first recording session that weekend. No books, no flashcards, just her voice and a microphone and Kellen with his eyes closed. "Listen," she said, speaking slowly into the recorder. "Catastrophe. Catastrophe. Hear that PH sound? That's Greek. Greek words love that sound. It's a signature, like a fingerprint made of air." Kellen listened. The sound settled into his mind differently than letters on a page. No dancing, no reversing, just pure meaning. "Now listen to this one. Philosophy. Phil-os-o-phi. Same PH sound. Greek again. And that phil at the beginning? That means love. So philosophy is the love of wisdom." "How do you hear the love part?" Kellen asked. "Because once you know the pattern, you recognize it everywhere. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Philanthropy, the love of humanity. Your ear learns what your eyes can't see." They worked every Saturday for a year. Lorraine spoke words into the recorder, breaking them into sound components, teaching Kellen to hear the difference between Latin roots and Greek roots, between Germanic compounds and French borrowings. She taught him that language families had sonic signatures, that etymology was audible if you knew how to listen. "Aqua," she'd say. "Hear that ache sound? Latin for water. So aquarium is where water lives. Aquatic means water-related. Aqueduct is where water travels. The sound tells you the meaning." Kellen began mapping sounds in his mind like constellations. Not visual patterns, but auditory ones. When he heard a new word, he could break it into components, trace its linguistic ancestry, spell it by understanding its structure, rather than memorizing its appearance. His grandmother made it a game. She'd give him impossible words, words he'd never encountered, and he'd work through them aloud. "Chrysanthemum," she'd say. "Chris, that's Greek for gold, like in Chrysler. Anthemum, that's flower, gold flower, Chrysanthem. She'd clap, delighted. "You're not guessing, baby, you're thinking. That's different. That's better." The cancer came during second grade. Aggressive, fast-moving. Lorraine lost weight, lost hair, lost strength, but she didn't lose purpose. "We need to record more," she told Simone, "while I still can." Those final months, she spent every good day recording. Hundreds of words, thousands. Her voice grew weaker, rougher, but she kept speaking into the microphone. Greek roots, Latin prefixes, Germanic compounds, French borrowings, the entire architecture of English broken into sound patterns Kellen could navigate. The last session happened 3 weeks before she died. She could barely sit up, but she held the recorder close. "Kellen, baby, come here." He climbed onto the bed carefully, afraid of hurting her. "I need you to understand something." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but he heard every word. "People are going to tell you that you learn wrong, that you're not as smart because you can't read like they do. They're going to make you feel small." "I already feel small," Kellen said. "I know, but baby, your brain isn't broken. It's just listening to something older than books. Humans spoke for 95,000 years before we wrote anything down. Your brain is doing what our ancestors did, processing language through sound and meaning, not through symbols on a page. That's not disability. That's a different kind of genius." She pressed the recorder into his hands. "I've given you the map, all the patterns, all the roots. You can spell anything if you can hear it. Promise me you'll trust this. Promise me you'll trust yourself." "I promise," he whispered. She died on a Sunday. They buried her with her reading glasses, but Kellen kept the chain. Now, 2 years later, he sat in his bedroom with his phone, scrolling through the audio files. Hundreds of recordings. his grandmother's voice teaching him even now. He touched the chain around his neck, the chain that used to hold her glasses now holding his own. Mrs. Vandermeer's words echoed, "He'll humiliate himself in front of the entire district." But Grandma's voice was louder. "Your brain isn't broken. It's listening to something older than books." Kellen closed his eyes and pressed play. "Catastrophe," his grandmother's voice said, warm and patient and alive. "Catastrophe. Greek signature. Listen for the pattern." He listened, and he decided to trust her. The library after school became Kellen's cathedral. Mr. Okafor had cleared a corner table near the windows, away from the fluorescent lights that made the letters dance worse. He'd brought his own lamp from home, warm and soft, and a pair of noise-canceling headphones. "Close your eyes," Mr. Okafor said, pressing play on the first recording. "Just listen." Kellen's grandmother's voice filled his ears. "Pneumonia. Pneumonia. Greek signature. The silent P, the EU combination. Listen for the breath in it." Kellen repeated it back, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the table. Not writing, mapping. Each sound had a shape in his mind, a place it belonged. "Again," Mr. Okafor said, "but this time tell me what you hear." The P is silent because it's Greek, like psychology, like pterodactyl. When Greek words start with PN or PS or PT, the P doesn't make sound. It's a ghost letter. Mr. Okafor smiled. "Your grandmother was brilliant." They worked like this every day, Monday through Friday, 3:30 to 5. Then Kellen's mother picked him up, and they practiced more in the car during her commute to the hospital for her night shift. "Bourgeoisie," Simone said, stopped at a red light. She pronounced it carefully, the way Grandma had taught her to. "Bourgeois," Kellen said from the back seat. "French signature, the silent S at the end, the ois sound." "How'd you know it was French?" "The way the sounds sit in the mouth. French sounds are in the front, German sounds are in the back of the throat, Latin sounds are in the middle." Simone glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Her son, 9 years old, explaining linguistic patterns most adults couldn't name. "Your grandma would be so proud." "I know," Kellen said quietly, touching the chain around his neck. The light turned green. They drove toward the hospital in comfortable silence. Simone's third 12-hour shift this week. She was exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she never missed their practice sessions. Meanwhile, across town, Tatum sat at her grandmother's dining room table, staring at flashcards until the words blurred. They'd been at this for 3 hours. "Again?" Mrs. Vandermeer said. She wasn't asking. "Grandma, I'm tired." "Tatum Elizabeth Vandermeer, we are not stopping until you can spell every word on this list without hesitation. The District B is in 6 weeks, and I will not have you embarrassed by that Baptiste boy." Tatum flinched at the way her grandmother said his name, like it tasted bad. "He's actually really smart," Tatum said quietly. "In class, when you're not looking, he answers questions. He knows things." Mrs. Vandermeer's face hardened. "He cannot read, Tatum. Whatever parlor trick his mother has taught him, it won't hold up under real pressure now. Sesquipedalian." Tatum spelled it correctly, but her hands were shaking. Her grandmother had been like this for weeks now. Obsessed. She'd stopped asking about Tatum's other classes, her friends, anything that wasn't spelling. Everything had become about beating Kellen. At school, Mrs. Vandermeer's cruelty became a daily ritual. She never did anything she could be formally reported for. She was too smart for that. But when Kellen raised his hand, she'd wait just long enough before calling on him that other students would lower theirs, embarrassed for him. When he turned in assignments, she'd place them at the bottom of her stack, sometimes forgetting to return them at all. When he asked for clarification, she'd sigh as if he was wasting everyone's time. If you'd done the reading, Kellen, you'd understand. The other students looked away. Some of them felt bad about it. None of them said anything, neither did the other teachers. Mrs. Patterson, who taught 3rd grade across the hall, noticed. She saw the way Mrs. Vandermeer's voice changed when she spoke to Kellen, the way her mouth tightened. But Mrs. Vandermeer had been teaching there for 28 years. She had seniority. She sat on hiring committees. Mrs. Patterson had a mortgage and a daughter starting college, so she looked away too. Institutional complicity doesn't require agreement. It just requires silence. But Kellen kept training. In the library with Mr. Okafor, in the car with his mother. At night, alone in his room, listening to his grandmother's voice. He was getting faster, more confident. The patterns were becoming automatic. Onomatopoeia, the recording said. O-N-O-M-A-T-O-P-O-E-I-A, Kellen whispered. Greek signature, the sound of the thing is in the word itself. He could do this. He knew he could. Then, 3 days before the District B, Mrs. Vandermeer made her move. She filed a formal challenge with the district office. 8 pages, single-spaced, citing spelling bee regulations and precedent. Her argument was simple. Kellen's method constituted technological assistance. He was using pre-recorded audio to study, which gave him an unfair advantage equivalent to having the answers in advance. Other students studied from written lists. Kellen studied from audio files. That, she argued, violated the spirit of fair competition. She wanted him disqualified. Principal Reeves called an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Simone had to leave work early, losing 4 hours of pay she couldn't afford to lose. Mr. Okafor rearranged his schedule. They sat in the principal's office, facing Mrs. Vandermeer across the desk. She'd brought documentation, printouts of spelling bee rules, highlighted sections about prohibited assistance, a detailed timeline of Kellen's practice methods. I'm not questioning the boy's effort, Mrs. Vandermeer said, her voice smooth and reasonable. I'm questioning whether his preparation method violates competitive standards. Audio recordings could contain pronunciation guides, etymological hints, pattern cues that other students don't have access to. It's essentially coaching during study time. Simone's hands were shaking, not from fear, from fury, the exhausted, bone-deep fury of a mother who'd fought this battle too many times. Every student uses study aids, she said. Flashcards, apps, tutors. My son uses audio because he can't read traditional materials. That's accommodation, not cheating. That's your interpretation, Mrs. Vandermeer said. The regulations are quite clear about technological assistance during competition. I believe they extend to preparation as well. Mr. Okafor leaned forward. With respect, Mrs. Vandermeer, you've never objected to students using computer programs to study, or spelling apps, or YouTube videos. Why is audio suddenly technological assistance? Mrs. Vandermeer's smile didn't reach her eyes. Those are commercially available resources. Kellen's recordings are custom-made, potentially containing information specific to B-word lists. Principal Reeves looked tired. He'd been hoping to avoid this. We need to review the regulations carefully. The district spelling bee is in 3 days. If we're going to disqualify a participant, we need legal grounds. I've provided them, Mrs. Vandermeer said. She slid her documentation across the desk. Simone stood up, her chair scraping loud against the floor. My son has worked for 6 weeks. He's earned his spot, and you know exactly what this is about. Mrs. Baptiste, no, you know. Everyone in this room knows. She doesn't think he belongs there. She's never thought he belonged there. And now she's using regulations as a weapon because she can't stand the idea of him succeeding. Mrs. Vandermeer's face remained perfectly calm. I'm simply ensuring competitive integrity. The meeting ended without resolution. Principal Reeves promised a decision by tomorrow. They had 3 days until the B. Mrs. Vandermeer had prepared her case with ruthless efficiency, complete with spelling bee regulations she claimed Kellen violated, and she looked absolutely confident that she'd already won. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Mrs. Vandermeer laid her documentation across the table with the precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence. 3 printed copies of district spelling bee regulations, sections highlighted in yellow. 4 precedent cases from other competitions where participants were disqualified for technological assistance. A timeline of Kellen's study methods that she'd somehow compiled, complete with dates and descriptions of his audio recordings. Section 4, paragraph 7, she said, her finger tapping the page. Participants may not use electronic devices or recorded materials that provide advanced knowledge of competition word lists. Kellen Baptiste has been using custom audio recordings for 6 weeks. That's a clear violation. Principal Reeves adjusted his glasses, reading the highlighted passages. He looked tired, but he was listening. Actually listening. The intent here is to prevent cheating during competition, not to regulate study methods. The spirit of the rule extends to preparation, Mrs. Vandermeer countered. Otherwise, what's to stop someone from recording all possible words and memorizing them phonetically? That's not spelling competence. That's technological circumvention of literacy requirements. Mr. Okafor's jaw tightened. Kellen isn't memorizing words. He's learning pattern recognition. There's a fundamental difference. Is there? Mrs. Vandermeer's smile was thin and sharp. He listens to recordings and reproduces what he hears. That's memorization, Mr. Okafor. Sophisticated, perhaps, but still memorization. Simone's hands were flat on the table, pressing down like she was trying to keep herself from rising. My son is using an accommodation for his learning difference. That's legally protected under federal disability law. This isn't an accommodation, Mrs. Vandermeer said, her voice cold and certain. An accommodation levels the playing field. This gives him an unfair advantage. He's accessing linguistic information in a way that bypasses the fundamental skill being tested, reading comprehension. He has dyslexia, Simone said, each word sharp as breaking glass. Reading comprehension isn't what spelling bees test. They test spelling competence. Mrs. Vandermeer leaned back in her chair, perfectly composed. And how does one develop spelling competence without reading? The two are inseparable. That's why his method is fundamentally different from traditional study. He's found a loophole, and I'm simply closing it. Principal Reeves looked between them, the regulations still in his hands. The silence stretched. He was wavering. Simone could see it. Mrs. Vandermeer could too, and her expression settled into quiet triumph. Mr. Okafor stood up. Test him. Everyone turned. Test Kellen right now. Give him words he's never heard before. Advanced words, collegiate level, nothing from standard study lists. If he can spell them by identifying etymological patterns in real time, it proves he's not memorizing. He's demonstrating legitimate linguistic analysis. Mrs. Vandermeer's eyebrows rose. You want to test him? Here? Right now. You choose the words if you want. Pull them from any source. If he's just memorizing recordings, he'll fail. If his grandmother's method actually works the way we say it does, he'll succeed. The room went quiet. Principal Reeves looked at Mrs. Vandermeer. That seems fair. She hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then her confidence reasserted itself like a mask sliding back into place. Fine. Let's settle this definitively. 15 minutes later, Kellen sat in the conference room, his mother beside him, Mr. Okafor across the table. Principal Reeves had pulled a collegiate spelling bee list from the district archive, words that hadn't been used in competition for 5 years. Words Kellen couldn't possibly have studied. Mrs. Vandermeer sat with her arms crossed, watching. You ready? Mr. Okafor asked gently. Kellen nodded. He closed his eyes. Chiaroscuro, Principal Reeves said. Kellen's face went still, listening. Not to the room, but to something deeper. The shape of the word, its weight and texture. Italian origin, he said quietly. Chiaro means clear or light. Oscuro means dark, art term Chiaroscuro. Principal Reeves checked the list. Correct. Mrs. Vandermeer's expression didn't change. Synecdoche. Kellen's eyes stayed closed. Greek. Syn means together, ekdoche means interpretation, when a part represents the whole, synecdoche. Correct. Prestidigitation. Latin roots. Presto means quick, digitus means finger, sleight of hand, prestidigitation. Correct. By the fourth word, Mrs. Vandermeer's arms had uncrossed. By the sixth, she was leaning forward slightly, watching Kellen's face. He wasn't hesitating. He was listening to each word like it was music, finding patterns in the syllables, tracing them back to their origins. Bougainvillea. French explorer's name, but Greek structure. Bougainvillea. Correct. Logoria. Greek. Logos means word, ria means flow. Excessive talking, logorrhea. By the eighth word, Mrs. Vandermeer's face had lost its certainty. The confident set of her mouth had softened into something closer to confusion. Onomatopoeia. Kellen smiled slightly, still with his eyes closed. Greek. Onoma means name, poiein means to make. Words that sound like what they mean. Onomatopioio. Correct. Pharmaceutical. Greek. Pharmakon means drug or medicine. Pharmaceuticals. Principal Reeves looked up from the list. His expression had changed completely. Last one. Hermaphrodite. Greek mythology, Kellen said. Hermes and Aphrodite. Their son, Hermaphrodite. 10 for 10, Principal Reeves said quietly. Kellen opened his eyes. Mrs. Vandermeer was staring at him like she was seeing him for the first time, or maybe seeing something she'd refused to see before. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. No words came. Principal Reeves set down the list. Kellen's method isn't memorization, it's linguistic analysis at a level most adults can't perform. He can compete. Simone's hand found Kellen's shoulder. Mrs. Vandermeer stood up without speaking. She gathered her documentation with shaking hands, the papers rustling loud in the quiet room. She walked to the door. In the hallway, Tatum was waiting. She'd been there the whole time, listening through the door that hadn't quite latched. When her grandmother emerged, Tatum looked at her with something that might have been disappointment, or maybe just recognition. Mrs. Vandermeer walked past her without stopping. The bee was in 3 days. And now, Kellen realized, it wasn't just about proving he could compete. It was about proving he could win. Because Mrs. Vandermeer's humiliation in this private room had just transformed into something more dangerous. This had become personal. The Riverside High School auditorium held 300 people, and every seat was filled. Parents lined the back wall. The local news had sent a camera crew. Someone from the district office was managing the live stream setup, making sure the angle captured both the stage and the judge's table. Kellen walked in with his mother and Mr. Okafor, and the first thing he noticed was how white the room was. 24 competitors sat in the reserved section, and he was the only black face among them. His hands were shaking. Simone squeezed his shoulder. Mrs. Vandermeer sat in the front row with Tatum's parents, her posture rigid. hands folded in her lap. She wore a navy cardigan and a pearl necklace. When Kellen walked past, she didn't look at him. She looked through him like he was already eliminated. Simone and Mr. Okafor found seats in the third row. Simone was holding her mother's reading glasses, the ones with the tortoiseshell frames that Kellen used to play with as a toddler. She rubbed her thumb across the smooth plastic over and over. The competition began at 2 o'clock sharp. The moderator explained the rules, the judges introduced themselves, and the first student approached the microphone. Round 1 was easy, basic words designed to settle nerves. Kellen spelled relevant without hesitation. Round 2 eliminated 3 students. Round 3 took out 5 more. By round 4, the difficulty was escalating. Kellen closed his eyes for each word, listening to the pronunciation, feeling for the patterns. Bureaucracy. Greek and French roots, B-U-R-E-A-U-C-R-A-C-Y. Round 5. Conscience. Latin, C-O-N-S-C-I-E-N-C-E. Round 6. Chrysanthemum. Greek, goldflower, C-H-R-Y-S-A-N-T-H-E-M-U-M. By round 8, only 6 students remained. By round 10, it was down to 3. Then 2. Kellen and Tatum. The auditorium went quiet. Even the live stream chat seemed to pause. Mrs. Vandermeer leaned forward slightly, her jaw tight. Round 11. Tatum approached the microphone. Onomatopoeia. She spelled it clearly, confidently. Her grandmother nodded once. Kellen's turn. Schadenfreude. German. Pleasure in another's misfortune. S-C-H-A-D-E-N-F-R-E-U-D-E. Round 12. The words were getting brutal now, pulled from collegiate-level lists. Tatum got chiaroscurist, an artist who uses light and shade, Italian root. She started strong, C-H-I-A-R-O-S-C-U-R-I-S-T. Then she hesitated. Her eyes went to her grandmother. She rushed the ending, added an extra I. The bell dinged. The crowd gasped. Tatum's face crumpled. She walked back to her seat with her head down. Mrs. Vandermeer's expression went rigid, her mouth a thin line, her eyes fixed on the stage like she could will the judges to reverse the decision. But the rules were clear. Kellen had to spell 2 words correctly to win the championship. The head judge cleared his throat. Logorrhea. Kellen closed his eyes. He asked for the pronunciation again. Then once more. He was listening for the seams where the roots connected. Greek. Logos. Word. Roya. Flow. Excessive talking. L-O-G-O-R-R-H-E-A. He paused between the double R and the H, making sure. From Greek logos meaning word and roya meaning flow. Correct. 1 word left. The judges conferred quietly. The head judge pulled a card from the championship envelope. He looked at it for a long moment, then looked at Kellen. Floxinosinihilipilification. The auditorium went completely silent. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." The live stream chat exploded. 29 letters. The longest word in the first edition of the Oxford English Dictionary, meaning the act of describing something as worthless. The irony landed like a physical weight. Simone's hand went to her mouth. Kellen asked for the pronunciation, then again, then a third time. He wasn't stalling. He was listening, feeling for the pattern. 4 Latin roots strung together like beads. Floci, nauci, nihili, pili, all words meaning of little value. Then fication, the act of making. He opened his mouth. F-L-O-C-C-I-N-A-H-I-L-I-P-I-L-I-F-I-C-A-T-I-O-N. He spelled it slowly, deliberately, pausing between each root cluster. From Latin, floci, nauci, nihili, and pili, all meaning something of little value, combined with fication, the act of making, the act of treating something as worthless. Silence. The judge looked down at his card, looked up at Kellen, looked at the other judges. "That is correct." The auditorium erupted. Simone was on her feet, sobbing, her mother's glasses pressed against her chest. Mr. Okafor was shouting, his hands in the air. Students were cheering, parents were applauding. The camera crew rushed forward, and Mrs. Vandermeer sat frozen. Her face drained of color, from pale pink to ashen white, like someone had pulled a plug and let all the blood run out. Her mouth opened slightly, her eyes went wide, pupils dilated in shock. She looked like she'd been struck. And everyone saw it. Dozens of phones were already out recording, capturing that exact moment. The teacher who said, "You can't even read," watching the student she'd dismissed spell a 29-letter word and explain its etymology. Her face pale and stunned, frozen in disbelief. Someone near the front caught it in perfect high definition. Mrs. Vandermeer, mouth open, eyes wide, the moment of recognition that she'd been wrong. Spectacularly, publicly, irrevocably wrong. Tatum wasn't watching Kellen accept his trophy. She was watching her grandmother, and her expression was complicated. Relief, maybe, or recognition. The look of someone seeing something they'd suspected but never wanted to confirm. Kellen walked off the stage holding a trophy taller than his torso. Simone wrapped him in her arms. Mr. Okafor was crying, but Mrs. Vandermeer just sat there, pale and still, while hundreds of phones captured her shock and the video began uploading to social media. The victory was complete, but the look on Mrs. Vandermeer's face suggested this wasn't over. Her humiliation in front of 300 people, broadcast live, captured from every angle, meant consequences were coming. For someone. The video went up at 7:43 p.m. A parent in the third row had captured it in perfect high definition. Mrs. Vandermeer's face draining of color, mouth opening, eyes going wide. The exact moment she realized she'd been wrong about everything. By 9 p.m. it had 50,000 views. Tatum sat in her bedroom, phone in her hands, watching the number climb. She'd seen that look on her grandmother's face before, usually directed at her when she made mistakes. The cold disappointment, the subtle cruelty disguised as standards. She opened her photo gallery, found the video from February. Kellen standing at the front of the classroom, Mrs. Vandermeer's voice cutting through, "You can't even read." Tatum had kept it for months. Insurance, maybe, or evidence. She sent it to the county education advocacy group with a single line. "This is who she really is." By midnight, both videos were circulating together. The humiliation and the comeuppance, a complete narrative in 2 acts. The comments started immediately. "I had a teacher like this, told me I was too stupid for algebra. I'm an engineer now. My son has dyslexia. His 3rd-grade teacher said he'd never graduate. He just got his master's degree. This is every black kid who was told they weren't good enough." The views exploded. 50,000 became 500,000. By Sunday morning, 2 million people had watched Mrs. Vandermeer's face go pale. Education blogs picked it up. Twitter threads dissected the implicit bias. Someone made a compilation of all the microaggressions captured in the background of Tatum's original video. The school district's phone lines lit up Monday morning. Dr. Hollis arrived to find 47 voicemails, 83 emails, and a news crew in the parking lot. Mrs. Vandermeer was placed on administrative leave by 10 a.m. Then the other parents came forward. Marcus Chen's mother, Mrs. Vandermeer, had told him his English would never be good enough for honors classes. He was born in Connecticut, Aisha Williams's father. She'd recommended Aisha for behavioral evaluation because she asked too many questions. Aisha was gifted. David Greenspan's parents, she'd refused to implement his documented ADHD accommodations, saying he just needed to try harder. A pattern documented over 7 years. Always students of color. Always students with learning differences. Always dismissed. Mrs. Vandermeer resigned 2 weeks later. Quiet. No formal termination proceedings. Just gone. Dr. Hollis called a press conference. "We failed these students," she said, standing at a podium with Simone and Mr. Okafor beside her. "But we're implementing comprehensive reforms, mandatory implicit bias training, new accommodation protocols, and we're launching a pilot program to study Dr. Kellen Baptiste's phonetic method for dyslexic students." She turned to Simone. "With Mrs. Baptiste as our lead consultant?" Simone touched her mother's reading glasses in her pocket, nodded. 6 months later, Kellen walked into Franklin Middle School wearing those same glasses on a chain around his neck. The specialized learning program had changed everything. Teachers who understood that different didn't mean deficient. Methods that worked with his brain instead of against it, space to be brilliant in his own way. He'd spoken at 3 school board meetings, testified about neurodiversity, answered questions from educators who were finally listening. The Baptiste method was now in 12 schools across 3 districts. Simone had reduced her medical billing hours to consult full-time, traveling to classrooms, training teachers, watching her mother's work finally recognized. Mr. Okafor had been promoted to district learning specialist. He designed the new accommodation protocols, made sure no student fell through the cracks again. And Tatum sat in the 3rd row of the middle school auditorium, waiting for the assembly to start. She and Kellen studied together now. Etymology, word origins, the stories hidden in language. Without her grandmother's pressure, she'd discovered she actually loved it. Not the competition, just the words themselves. Kellen stepped to the microphone. "My grandmother taught me something important," he said. His voice was steady, confident. "She taught me that letters can lie, but sounds always tell the truth." He adjusted her glasses on his nose. "Today we're launching the first spelling bee specifically for students with learning differences. Because there are millions of ways to be smart, and we're going to celebrate all of them." The auditorium erupted in applause. Kellen closed his eyes, listened to the sound of student voices, the rustle of programs, the squeak of auditorium chairs, all the sounds that told stories if you knew how to hear them. He opened his eyes and looked directly forward, as if seeing through the moment into something larger. If you believe every child deserves to be seen for their actual abilities, not their perceived limitations, share this story. Because there are millions of kids like me waiting for someone to listen, waiting for someone to see that different doesn't mean less. It just means different, and different can be extraordinary. He touched his grandmother's glasses. "My grandmother knew that. Now the world does too." The sound of applause swelled, but Kellen was listening to something else. The sound of change, the sound of doors opening, the sound of a future where kids like him didn't have to prove they belonged. They just did.